In 1952, the average British household threw away less food in an entire year than we now bin in a single month. That's not nostalgia talking. That's data from WARAP, the government's own waste advisory body, cross-referenced with Ministry of Food records from the rationing era. Somewhere between our grandparents' kitchens and our own, we didn't just lose recipes. We lost an entire operating system for living well on very little. And the maddening part? Most of those so-called survival hacks weren't secret at all. They were ordinary. They were everywhere. We just stopped. This is the story of what we abandoned, why we abandoned it, and how taking even 3 of these practices back could save the average household over $1,400 a year. There's a photograph from 1943 hanging in the Imperial War Museum that tells you everything you need to know about what we gave up. It shows a woman. She's listed only as Mrs. H. Wilkinson Bermondsey. Standing in front of a backyard Anderson shelter she'd converted into a mushroom farm. Mushrooms growing on damp sacking in a corrugated steel tube designed to withstand a bomb blast. That woman wasn't a survivalist. She wasn't eccentric. She was typical. During rationing, the British government ran one of the most successful public education campaigns in modern history. The Ministry of Food published over 2,000 recipes. The Dig for Victory program turned 3.5 million gardens and allotments into food production sites. According to the Royal Horticultural Society's own historical archives, domestic food growing peaked in 1944 at roughly 10 million tons of vegetables across the UK. But the knowledge went deeper than growing carrots. Women like Mrs. Wilkinson understood food preservation without refrigeration. They knew how to stretch a single chicken across 4 meals. They donned socks. They rendered fat. They made cleaning products from ingredients that cost pennies. And they didn't do it because they were noble. They did it because the alternative was going without. What matters is what happened next. The 1950s brought prosperity. The 1960s brought convenience culture. By the 1970s, the freezer had replaced the larder, the supermarket had replaced the greengrocer, and an entire generation of accumulated survival knowledge started evaporating. Not violently, quietly, skill by skill, meal by meal. Until we arrived here. In 2026, spending an average of $5,372 a year on food per household, according to the Office for National Statistics, while simultaneously throwing away 9.5 million tons of it annually. That's not progress. That's amnesia with a receipt. It started, as most quiet disasters do, with a promise that sounded reasonable. Why spend 40 minutes making soup when you can open a tin in 40 seconds? Why mend a shirt when Primark sells a new one for £3? Why learn to preserve fruit when Tesco sells jam for 89p? Each trade-off felt tiny, harmless, even sensible. But researchers at the University of Sheffield's Department of Sociological Studies published a paper in 2023 that tracked what they called domestic deskilling across 3 generations of British families. They interviewed over 1,100 participants across South Yorkshire. The findings were striking. Among those born before 1945, 92% could name at least 5 food preservation methods. Among those born after 1980, that number dropped to 11%. The knowledge didn't fade. It fell off a pointy-arse cliff. And here's what the convenience industry never advertised. The cost. Not just financial, though that's staggering. The average British household now spends $60 a month on products and services that replace skills their grandparents performed for free. I'm talking about the deeper cost. Dependency. When you can't fix, grow, mend, preserve, or improvise, you have no choice but to buy. And when you have no choice, you have no power. A retired teacher in Swansea named Bronwyn Rees put it to me more bluntly than any academic paper could. She said, "My mother could feed 6 people on what I'd spend feeding 2, and she'd have leftovers. I ring for a takeaway and feel guilty about the bill." That's not because food got more expensive. The first hack your grandparents would be furious you forgot is so blindingly simple, it'll make you feel a bit daft. Bread heels. The end crusts. A 2024 survey by the Food Waste Charity. Too Good To Go found that 68% of UK households throw them away. Your grandmother turned those heels into breadcrumbs, bread pudding, stuffing, thickener for soups, and fried bread for a Saturday morning fry-up. One family in Inverness I spoke with started saving bread heels in January last year. By December, they'd made over 40 meals using only those discarded ends. 40 meals from rubbish. The estimated saving? Around 175 pounds. Now that sounds modest until you stack it alongside the second forgotten hack, the stock pot. Before the 1990s, most British kitchens had a pot on the back of the stove, sometimes called the stock pot, sometimes the everything pot. Chicken carcasses, vegetable peelings, onion skins, herb stalks. Everything that we now scrape into the bin went into that pot. A slow simmer. A rich, free broth. Nutritional analysis published in the Journal of Food Composition and Analysis in 2022 found that homemade bone broth contains measurably higher concentrations of collagen and glycine than any commercial stock cube. And here's the financial angle. Replacing 2 shop-bought stock cubes a week with homemade broth saves roughly $45 a year. Trivial. Multiply it by 52 weeks across 10 similar substitutions, and the numbers start compounding. The laboratory analysis on the third hack came back last month, and the results genuinely startled me. Vinegar. White vinegar, specifically. Your great-grandmother used it to clean windows, descale kettles, remove soap scum, deodorize drains, and rinse laundry. Modern cleaning product manufacturers would rather you didn't know this, but researchers at University College London's Department of Microbiology tested white vinegar against 3 leading antibacterial sprays in 2024. On common household bacteria, E. coli, Staphylococcus aureus, and Listeria. A 5% vinegar solution eliminated over 99% of surface bacteria. The branded sprays? Comparable results. The price difference? A liter of white vinegar costs 29p at Aldi. The branded spray? £2.80 for 750 ml. Over a year, switching to vinegar for basic surface cleaning could save a household between $50 and $80, depending on usage. Here's where the story takes a stranger turn. The fourth hack involves something called pot washing, and not in the way you think. Before the washing machine became a household fixture in the late 1960s, clothes were washed by hand using a method that involved soaking garments overnight in cold water with soda crystals. Modern textile scientists, and I spoke to one at Leeds Beckett University, confirm that cold water soaking with sodium carbonate is actually gentler on fibers than a 40-degree machine cycle. It extends the life of clothing by an estimated 30 to 40%. A kilogram box of soda crystals costs £1 at most supermarkets and lasts roughly 6 weeks of regular use. Compare that to the average annual spend on laundry detergent, which the Energy Saving Trust puts at $108 per household, and the savings multiply. 3 months ago, a retired nurse in Sheffield contacted me about the 5th hack, and her story changed how I think about waste entirely. Her name's Maureen. She's 78, and she hasn't bought cling film in over 30 years. Instead, she uses beeswax wraps, which she makes herself from cotton scraps and beeswax pellets, and repurposes glass jars for absolutely everything. Jam jars, sauce jars, pickle jars. She stores dried goods, freezes portions, organizes her pantry, and even gives them as gifts filled with homemade chutney. The British Glass Manufacturers Confederation estimates that 750,000 tons of glass jars are recycled in the UK annually. Maureen's point was sharper than any statistic. Recycling means you've already wasted it once. I need to pause here for a moment. While compiling the research for the next 5 hacks, I stumbled across a pattern that ties them all together. And it's something I wasn't expecting to find. Each of these abandoned practices doesn't just save money, they reduce dependency on supply chains that, as we saw during the pandemic, and again during the cost of living squeeze, can fracture overnight. What our grandparents built wasn't thrift, it was resilience. And we traded it for the illusion of convenience. The sixth hack is darning, mending, visible repair. Call it what you like. Our grandparents called it common sense. A 2023 report by the Charity Wrap found that the average British person discards 3.1 kilograms of clothing every year, much of it with minor fixable damage. A basic darning kit costs under $3 and lasts years. The Repair Cafe network, now operating in over 250 locations across the UK, teaches mending for free. A grandmother in Swansea I interviewed repairs everything, from school trousers to winter coats using techniques her mother taught her during the 1960s. She estimates she saved her extended family over $600 in the last 2 years simply by replacing buttons, patching knees, and restitching seams. The seventh hack involves your garden. Or, if you haven't got one, your windowsill. Microgreens, herbs, salad leaves. During rationing, even families in terraced housing grew cress on damp flannel. Today, the National Allotment Society reports that waiting lists for plots have doubled since 2019, but you don't need an allotment. Growing herbs on a kitchen windowsill, basil, parsley, coriander, mint, saves an average of $2 a week compared to buying supermarket packets. That's $104 a year from 3 small pots. And the nutritional difference is measurable. Fresh-picked herbs retain significantly more vitamin C and essential oils than pre-packaged alternatives, according to research published by the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry. Here's something the packaging doesn't mention about the eighth hack. Oats. Porridge oats. Not the instant flavored sachets at $2.50 a box. Proper rolled oats at 75p a kilogram. Our grandparents ate porridge every morning, not because they lacked imagination, but because it was the single most cost-effective, nutritionally dense breakfast available. Dietitians at the British Nutrition Foundation confirmed in their 2024 guidance that a bowl of porridge made with water and topped with a sliced banana provides sustained energy, soluble fiber, and costs approximately 8p per serving. Compare that to the average UK breakfast cereal at 35p per serving, or a meal deal breakfast at £3.50. Over a year, switching to porridge 5 mornings a week saves roughly $140 per person. The ninth hack genuinely surprised me because I thought it had disappeared entirely. Batch cooking and communal meal sharing. Before the ready meal era, neighbours, particularly in mining communities, docklands and council estates, routinely cooked in bulk and shared portions. A sociologist at the University of Edinburgh published oral histories in 2022, documenting how terraced street communities in central Scotland maintained informal meal-sharing networks well into the 1970s. The practice cut individual food costs, reduced waste, and strengthened social bonds. Modern equivalents exist: community fridges, meal share apps, cooking circles. But participation remains a fraction of what it once was. Reviving this single practice in a street of 10 households could save each family an estimated $25 to $40 a month, based on figures from the Sustainable Food Trust. The 10th and final hack is perhaps the most powerful, because it underpins all the others. Passing it on. Teaching. Our grandparents didn't hoard their knowledge. They demonstrated it daily, in kitchens and workshops and allotments. A child watching bread being made wasn't receiving a cookery lesson. They were absorbing a survival skill. The decline of home economics in British schools. Renamed, restructured, and finally made optional in most curricula by the early 2000s, severed one of the last institutional links to practical domestic knowledge. According to the Design and Technology Association, fewer than 30% of secondary schools in England now offer dedicated food preparation classes. The hack isn't a trick, it's transmission. Cooking with your grandchild. Showing a neighbour how to darn. Sharing a recipe at the school gate. That's how knowledge survived for centuries. And that's how we bring it back. A retired metalworker in Sheffield named Arthur Jessup grows enough vegetables on a 12 by 6 foot plot to feed himself and 3 neighbours from April to October. He spends roughly $35 a year on seeds. His estimated harvest value, based on supermarket equivalent prices, over $800. Arthur didn't learn this from a YouTube video. He learned it from his father, who learned it during Dig for Victory. The chain is unbroken in his family. For most of us, it snapped decades ago. But chains can be reforged, and you don't need to adopt all 10 hacks at once. The research consistently shows that implementing even 3 of these practices produces compounding returns. Start with the ones that cost nothing. Save your bread heels this week. Start a stock pot this Sunday. Switch 1 cleaning product to vinegar. Those 3 changes alone, bread heels, stock, vinegar, represent a combined annual saving of approximately $290 with virtually 0 effort and 0 upfront cost. If you want to go further, the Repair Cafe Network is free to attend and operates in most major towns. The National Allotment Society can point you to your nearest plot or waiting list. Your local library. Yes, they're still open. Stocks books on preserving, mending, and batch cooking that would have been standard household references 50 years ago. The resources exist. What vanished was the culture of using them. None of this is about going backwards. Your grandmother didn't want you hunched over a washboard. She wanted you to have choices, real ones. The kind that come from knowing how things work, how food keeps, how cloth holds, how a garden grows. When you understand those things, a price increase at the supermarket isn't a crisis. It's an inconvenience. And that difference between crisis and inconvenience is the entire gap between dependence and resilience. We live in a country that once fed itself through a world war, using knowledge passed across kitchen tables and garden fences. That knowledge didn't expire. We just filed it under old-fashioned and moved on. But old-fashioned is a luxury label invented by companies that profit when you can't do things for yourself. Every skill you reclaim is a bill you stop paying. Every technique you teach someone else is a chain link restored. Pick 1 hack from this list. Just 1. Try it this week. Time it. Cost. Then come back here and tell me what happened. I want to hear that you made stock from scraps. And it tasted better than anything in a foil packet. I want to hear that your nan taught you to darn, and now your favorite jumper's got another winter in it. I want to hear that a 12-year-old in your house learned to make bread, and it cost 11 pence a loaf. I've got a full series planned on Lost British Kitchen, skills, traditional preserving methods, and the real cost of convenience food. If you want to see the next one, and I promise it'll change how you look at your weekly shop. Subscribe so it reaches you, and share this with someone who could use it. Not because the algorithm demands it, but because this is exactly the kind of knowledge that only survives when people pass it along. That's how it worked for centuries. That's how it works now.